and I have the pleasure of bringing this session to you. My name is Christian, and I'm a front-end developer at Lean Icon Technology. At the end of this session, what we are looking to learn, have a fair idea of the core concepts of front-end development. That we will talk fairly or extensively about the front-end development workflow and some best practices for effective collaboration between developers and product managers. So a question I'd like to answer is, what is front-end development, right? Or what is the responsibility of a front-end developer? What do we do? So you visit a website, right? You realize that you see your web pages, how you interact with them, how you navigate through your web pages and everything. This is the work of a front-end developer. They make sure that the interface side of a product that you want to build is rendered on a browser for users to get access to it. So your products and how good your products will be is solely dependent on a front-end developer, and well, maybe influenced also by your UI UX designer and product. They are going to interact with your front-facing part. The front-facing parts of the application would be because or due to a front end. Now we will talk about the core technologies in. I'm sure most of you have heard of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. They are basically the three technologies that is required to build a website. Actually, these technologies is what a front end would use to build their website. So we'll talk about HTML first. HTML is basically the backbone of any web application, right? Or web page specifically. HTML structures the content on your website, and it does this by providing certain tags like your heading tags that you use to describe the content on your website. So probably you want to represent a header or a heading on your website. You put it in a heading tag. You want to represent a paragraph. You put it in a paragraph tag, and then basically structure the website and how you want it to look on the browser is because of HTML or hypertext markup language. Then CSS, basically its use is styling, right? It makes your web page look attractive and presentable. You visit somebody's web page, you realize the page is very nice, aesthetically pleasing. It is because of CSS. CSS, to an extent, also probably influence how your content is structured, not as much though, but then basically gives life or gives aesthetics to your website. Then finally, we will talk about JavaScript. JavaScript is what makes your web page interactive, right? With JavaScript, you have the opportunity to define how your website should behave when users interact with them. So you have like a web page where you take users' inputs, right? Like a form on a page. If a user submits their inputs and then they hit the submit button, what happens? Because HTML, CSS, they are not able to interpret or work with data that have been submitted by the user. But it's JavaScript that captures this user's data and then sends it to a server somewhere for processing. Again, JavaScript also can be used to create dynamic and responsive elements. So with the same scenario that I give, supposing you sent your details, right? You sent your details, then you get an error on the server. How do you know that? It's JavaScript. It has the ability, it has the power to render some parts of HTML and CSS to you to give you some sort of feedback that your credentials that was sent or your information you sent wasn't able to process because of one or two things. It gives you that feature. JavaScript has that power to do that. And also probably maybe you were able to successfully submit your data or information. JavaScript has the power to render or show you a success or good message. Now, all this can be put or conceptualized with the human anatomy as an analogy, right? So HTML can be the skeleton if we are using the human anatomy to explain what these core technologies are. HTML, that's the skeleton, can represent the skeleton of a human being. The skeleton defines how the human body is. Your arms, your legs is because of the structure or the form that the skeleton takes. Okay, but then we can all agree that skeletons, they don't really look very good. So when we were created, we're given skins. Okay, some are black, some are white, some have good eyes, some have beard, and some have no hair, just like me, still looking good. That is or can be attributed to CSS, right? We can compare this to CSS, and CSS is what is giving that beauty to your structure or your HTML, which is, if bringing it into the human anatomy, would be your skeleton. CSS would be the skin that makes you look good, right? Then if you have nice skin, you have nice, everything has been designed very nice, structure is there, the aesthetics too is there, and then there is no live to you. You cannot respond to stimuli, you cannot do certain human functionalities or basic activities, then there is no use to you. But then that is where the brain comes in. The brain can be associated with JavaScript, right? So your brain will now help or dictate how you move, how you run, how you eat, respond to your environment and all of that, because of your brain. That can be attributed to JavaScript. So this is a very nice, simple way to capture the core concept of web development. But then, when developing your websites, an issue arises. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript will be sufficient enough to build a simple web application. But most of the times, we are building very huge products that we aim to solve problems with, right? But HTML, CSS, and JS alone in their raw form cannot be used to do that, because then you will not be able to scale your application or develop faster. So experts sat down and then they decided to come up with frameworks, right? Frameworks that combine all of these three and then give the developers more of superpowers or advanced features and functionalities to be able to build websites and build very easy. So an example would be like routing, and if you are building a web page or a website with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript only, you'd have to handle how your application is navigated through, which is very tedious. But with the help of frameworks, it becomes very easy. You can route through applications, and a typical example would be when you visit any website. Sometimes you realize that they have certain components on the websites that repeats themselves, right? They look the same, but then maybe they have different content within. When you are using raw HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to develop, you realize you'd have to write code for every individual component. But these frameworks give us the ability to create just one component, and then we are able to replicate this component across our website. What happens now is that you are writing less code for a lot of things. This is just one of the advantages of using frameworks. They make web development very easy and sweet. So some of the frameworks and popular frameworks are React. We have React, which was developed by Facebook, which is arguably I think the most used front-end framework in the world right now. Yes, it has a lot of support. React, it has a lot of developer support. It was created in 2013, I think. Yes. Then we have Vue, which was created by Ivan. Vue also came in 2014. I think Vue was to address the issues that React had. So Vue was created, which is fairly easier when it comes to learning curve. It's easier more than React. Then we have Angular 2. And Angular amongst the three would probably be what you would say is most difficult for the front-end developer to learn, right? So Angular was developed by Google in 2010, and we have other frameworks out there too, like Svelte and then others. But then these are the three popular ones that a lot of developers use. Now these three, right, that I've mentioned, they are what are known as SPAs. Now, somebody would ask why would a product manager need all of this information? I'll address that in a very short while. These frameworks that I mentioned are what we know as SPAs, right? So SPAs, what are SPAs? Basically, single page applications. Single page applications, what it basically means is you have just one HTML document. I'm sorry, I'll get a little bit technical here, okay? So just note down your questions, and at the end of the session, you can ask. You have just basically one HTML document. And with the power of JavaScript, when maybe a user visits your site and it's a single page application, what happens is when they visit your site, they hit your domain, they get served by the server, right? They receive everything or every resource they need from the server. And JavaScript is what is used to navigate through your pages, just using one HTML document. So one HTML document, then your content is rendered in that HTML document. So if you navigate to a different page on your website or web application, what happens is JavaScript will dynamically change the content on your page. It doesn't necessarily change the document. You just only have one single HTML document. That is why it is known as single page application. Now, this one has a lot of advantages to it, like speed, and then fast navigation, but then it has a very important downside that needs to be addressed, which is SEO. Your SEO is hit. So SEO is basically software engine optimization, the ability for Google to crawl through your website and then rank your website based on what people are looking for. So you probably have your website, somebody comes, your website is maybe talking about or giving rendering service like e-commerce, or maybe you teach on your website, right? Somebody comes on your website and then they Google or search for something related to e-commerce or teaching. What happens? Your website is ranked or given to them first or second. It is based on Google's indexing. They've gone through your website and then they've done some search and realize, oh, this website is good for what you are looking for. So let's recommend this website to this person. With single page applications, Google don't get the opportunity to go through your website and see if they can recommend it, because it's just one application. So if most of your content or content is on a different page, Google don't get the ability to crawl through those pages. You see, so then SEO is hit. So what happens with that? What can developers do? So that is where multi-page applications come in. Multi-page applications like Next and Next, which is based on React, and Next, which is based on Vue. What they do is they don't, upon request, when a user visits your website, they don't feed the browser every resource. They feed what is necessary. So they just give the page that has been requested. So probably the home page, right? The landing page. Then when the user navigates to a different page, it hits the server again, and then they get a different page. So what is happening is every page that you are seeing is a document on its own, right? So Google now has the opportunity to crawl through all of these documents and then find content for indexing and recommend your website to people or users who come and search for related terms, things that are related to what you serve on your website. Okay, and SEO, it's a whole lot. There's a whole lot about SEO. that I'm sure we would talk about in our PM series. So stay tuned. Yes, and then learn more. So this is SEO and how SEO can be resolved. Now, someone will ask, PM, why do I need to know this? It helps you a lot to make decisions, right? So, for instance, we talked about complexities and how you are, as a developer, how fast you can learn any of the frameworks above. If you know the learning curves associated with the frameworks as a PM, and then probably maybe you have a team, and then the team is composed of fairly new developers who are going, maybe there are some senior developers in there, but they are not as much as the new developers. What you do, you have to pick a framework that is easier to learn, and you can deliver value faster, because Agile is all about delivering value. Okay, so what do? You look at the framework with the least steep learning curve, and then you recommend that we use that framework for building our products. If a PM didn't know this decision would be very difficult to arrive at. So you might probably pick some framework which in the end they realize they cannot deliver much value because of how difficult the framework is to learn. Then another issue comes in with SEO, for instance, the multi-page or single page. What do we use? So maybe you are building a web app. You don't require people to know that this web app exists. You can go with single page applications, right? But then maybe you're building a product, an e-commerce site. The product is an e-commerce site. Then you use a single page framework. What happens? Google is not able to index your website because the PM wasn't equipped with this knowledge. They cannot make very, very informed decisions. So knowing these things can help PMs, work in a team, also work with their developers and deliver value. Now, let's talk about the front-end development workflow. So in a typical Agile team or Scrum team, you would probably have your researchers. They would go do their requirements gathering and everything. They come up with a design, right, for the product that you want to build. There's design, they've thought through it, everything is working gorgeously. What happens? The front-end developer's task is now to convert this design into the browser readable code, okay? Because this design cannot be put on the browser for users to interact with. It has, like I said earlier, the browser only understands HTML, CSS, and what? JavaScript. So the front enders now convert this to a very nice code. And then in their development process, I think we talked about DevOps some time ago in our PM series, where one of the DevOps characteristics is test-driven development, right? So the front-end developer has to make sure that he's writing tests, okay, writing tests to make sure that quality is being built into the products they are developing. And PMs, if PMs are not aware or equipped with this knowledge, they wouldn't know it. Most of the times, some of these things are added to the team's definition of done, right? To make sure that before your work even qualifies, it has to meet testing standards. If it doesn't meet testing standards, then we don't redeem your work as done. Okay, then after the product has been built, everything is working, testing, they've gone through testing, realize it's good for deployment, then your code is served onto the internet for the public to access. And then also on DevOps, we talked about deployment and how you can deploy, how you can feature toggle, just show some parts of your website to some people and all of that. Yes. So you go to the deployment phase, and then your website is now accessible to everybody. And in this on this web, that's more tools that the front end will use. The front ender will use Git for version control and management and collaboration. They will use VS Code for editing of their code, or maybe any other code editor. And then probably Figma or Adobe XP and all of that for design. So these tools are more of core to what the front end developer will do. So now let's talk about some non-functional requirements, right? So sometimes these probably in a sprint or even in building a product, a Scrum team, the product owner would probably be focusing on the features, right? That they are going to build for that website, and sometimes they might miss things like non-functional requirements. There are things that they are not related to the products that you are building, but they are very important. Okay, it's very important that these things are also built as part of the product. One of these things is accessibility. Accessibility simply means your website being accessible on all various platforms. So Google Chrome, Safari, um, what's the name? Opera, you know, the browsers, and then the various operating systems, Windows and Mac and all of that. You realize that for a front-end developer, when you are writing your code, you design some components, and then it looks different on one browser and it looks different on another browser because of how they are interpreting your code. You have to make sure that standards are being met, and so your website is looking the same across all, except of course if it's not captured in your definition of done, and you don't really mind. But if it is, and it is for every Scrum team, because to deliver value means that you are putting out quality products. So accessibility has to be met. Your website has to look the same across all platforms. Then there is performance, how fast your website loads, how fast would content be shown to your users when they don't, if they log into or maybe visit your website. Perform your images, how big are they that they are hindering your website from loading very fast, and then some of the codes, how optimized are they that they allow the website to be shown fast to your users. So these things are sometimes other times not captured in your PBIs, but a very well-functioning Scrum team would make sure that things like this, if your PM is aware of non-functional requirements like this, they add it to their definition of done, and we put on the done. If you are using board, no work we put on done if it doesn't meet any of these requirements, if they are in the definition of done. And there is the aspect of security. If a user submits data on your platform, are they going to be exposed to the public? The front end developer has to make sure that data is properly handled and that the user's information isn't being leaked. Then there is responsiveness, which most of the times is captured in your PBIs, because obviously very good UI UX designers would design for most of the screens. They design for tablets, design for desktop, and they design for mobile as well. So developer front end, if these requirements are able to have response, develop if you your website responsive, it's quality out there. If people cannot visit Okay. We were facing, I was facing some technical difficulties, but I'm back and I'll continue from where I left off. So all of these things, a PM has to understand them because it influences how they create their product backlog. Okay, and product backlog for a sprint or Scrum team is very important. Okay, how your product backlog is arranged or created and estimated is going to influence how value is being developed delivered incrementally. Okay, so if all these things are captured, if they don't know this, and then maybe you realize maybe in some teams a developer might estimate for a feature that is being built, maybe a login feature or maybe a form. The developer estimates that, okay, maybe I'll be using 8 points to complete this. Then because product owner manager wants value delivered immediately, they don't put into consideration all these requirements. Okay, maybe the reason he wants this is because of accessibility, performance. He wants to make sure that because that's how says no, this and product managers. So first point to note is clear communication. That is regular meetings and updates to ensure everyone is on the same page. Luckily for us in Agile and Scrum, we have we are giving various or several opportunities for regular inspection and adaptation and learning from what we are doing. So we have activities or events like Scrum, daily Scrum. We have the review. We have our retrospectives where we can learn from what we have done, and then developers can also actively communicate with their product owners or product managers about the features they are building on a product. So at that point is when the developer gets the opportunity to express, or PM gets the opportunity to listen to the developer and then also gain some knowledge from what they are doing or what they are saying about how some product is being built. For an example would be a developer is building a feature where he doesn't really have an idea of how the feature is going to be built. This thing happens mostly to front-end developers, because the UI designer would have designed something very scary and you have to implement it. You are looking at it, you are just imagine how you do it. You feel like, okay, if I go by this route, it's going to work. If I use this, if I put this here, to work. But then in the process of developing, you realize, no, this wouldn't work. So you have to restart everything again. The PM or the PO should be receptive enough to listen to what the developer is saying, that, oh, I think because of the complexities arising, I don't think 2 story points would be enough for this feature. So can we increase the story points and then arrange the sprints backlog accordingly? PM, you have to be able to listen to them and then do that, because in the end, the team, you are working together to deliver value, and to deliver value, you have to make sure that you are meeting certain standards set by the team itself. Okay. Then there is shared tools. So using common tools for project management like Jira and Trello and Azure, and using design tools like Figma and Sketch, where with the and Trello, you are, as a PM, you are able to see the progress that is being made in a sprint because of developers moving their tasks accordingly, and you're able to. It also boils down to communication, where you can reach out to developers and then ask them about the progress of their development. Then final is iterative feedback. I think I hit on this earlier. Scrum has given the opportunity to use feedback loops to help catch issues early and then ensure that the product that we are building is meeting users' expectations. So to conclude, we talked about the core concepts of front-end development, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Talk about some frameworks and how they are used. Then we talked about the typical workflow of a front-end developer. Then finally, we talked about best practices for effective collaboration in a Scrum team. So this brings me to the end of the session. Any questions? I welcome them. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm sorry if my apology earlier didn't go through. We were facing technical challenges, so we couldn't. Yes, so I was cut off. But when I came back, I'm sorry, on our end, we didn't do our due diligence to make sure that this show or series is the best for everyone to gain knowledge. Thank you very much. Okay, in the absence of questions, I think our time has elapsed. Okay, a question has come in. Which framework should you start with as a beginner? So I think what, as a beginner, what you have to understand is understanding the core of front-end development, which is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Because ultimately, your use of any framework at all would be based on how good you are in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Earlier I said that some of them are steep, they have steep learning curves. But if you are really, really good with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you've made it an extension of who you are, transitioning to any framework at all wouldn't be a problem. But just to answer you, React would probably be the best to go to, because React has a lot of support. It is the most used framework. It has a lot of support, a lot of plugins that will help make your work as a developer easier. But the easiest, in my opinion, would be Vue.js. Vue.js just picks the concept of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It makes using it very easy. And if you are very good with Tailwind CSS, which is another framework for CSS particularly, it will help you to become a front-end genius. Thank you very much, Faisal. Is it advisable for product owners to consult the tech lead for the team velocity of each team member? Well, team velocity isn't measured on member basis. It is the team. Okay, that is why it's called team velocity in the first place. And it's between their velocity. It's not one person who says, okay, we want the velocity to be 50. No, Scrum in itself is based on something we call empirical learning, right? Which means that you are learning based on what the previous thing. So you realize we have feedback loops where you get the opportunity to look back, retrospect, inspect, and adapt. Okay, so your first sprint, probably you realize that you were able to meet some targets. That is how you measure your velocity. Your first sprint, you were able to meet a certain target. Your second sprint, you realize the target that you set was too high, so you were not able to meet that target. Then your third sprint, so based on the sprints, you measure how much work you are able to do on the average, and then you use this as your team's velocity. It is not measured based on individuals, because in a team, at some point, what can happen is one member can have less work than another member. If you are measuring based on velocity, and you want to balance work between the developers, it becomes difficult to do. But team basis, you realize that you can variate amongst the developers, but then the team would have one constant velocity that they are meeting per sprint, and that is how you deliver value in Scrum. Consistency also counts. Thank you very much, Mr. Frank. Okay. So thank you very much for coming. We've spent more time than we intended to. I'll see you again next week, same time here on the PM series. Have a good day, everyone.